I'm using natural light, so this is bad. Oh no. Hi everybody, welcome back to Donica and Shelby Reads. My name is Shelby. I make videos on this channel with my sister Donica about books. Today me and Donica are filming our recent reads for July. Because yeah, we're in August now. It's the first week in August and it's crazy that the entire first half of the year is essentially over. But now's not the time for me to freak out about that because me and Donica already freaked out in our last video, our mid-year book freakout tag. So go check that out. Go see what books were freaking us out for the first half of this year. So I want to go ahead and just jump right into my part. I don't have much to say. If Donica does, maybe she'll say it here. This month I read two really kind of spooky, eerie books, both from Book of the Month. I love it and I think I'm on a spooky book kick, so I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should just hold off until October and read spooky books or have like Halloween in August and just start out like it's starting to become almost fall. I'm like trying to pretend like it's not 100 degrees outside and I'm wearing this sweater. I think what I might do is just start prepping myself to get into some more spooky authors so that by October I can just go full force with spooky books because I loved it this month. This was an amazing change of pace. Let me go ahead and get into the books I read this month. They all look very aesthetically pleasing by each other. I have a nice variety of color here. And the cool thing is my Book of the Month books, I like that they're starting to line up and I can't wait to have all those little tabs on my bookshelf. That's gonna look so cool. I started this month, kind of finished up last month. It was like at the beginning of this month that I read The Vanishing Half by Bennett. The Vanishing Half, which first of all, that cover is just gorgeous. It's about two sisters who live, I believe they live in the South. I cannot remember the state that they're in, but they live in this city where the way things like fell historically and societally, the town ended up being like majority black people of color in that town, but they're all very, very light complected. And then there's these two sisters, Stella and Desiree Vine. They are extremely light complected. They are in fact white passing. They're both very different and they grow up in this town and they want to get away. They want to get out. They eventually do get out of the town, but both of them begin living very different lives. One of the sisters decides to leave the town and essentially pass for white for her entire life. There's a point in the book where it lives in a town where a black family is being discriminated against, and she is so held firm in this new identity that she felt that she had to create to protect herself. I can't give away what happens, but as you can see, this dynamic she's created for herself where she is a white woman in a white woman's world, but she's not internally. After a series of events happen, she has to go home. She has to go back to that town that she grew up in. And it's said over and over again that the bond between these sisters was so inseparable. They really did feel like they were two halves to the same person. So we get to see what happens when these two halves, because of the pain that they're feeling externally that I can't understand as a non-black person of color, but as a person of color, I can see. I don't want to compare my experience because experiences are so different. I could never understand a black person of color's experience. So external pressures from the world that kind of were closing in on them and forced both of them to make decisions that they thought were best for their life, and we get to see those decisions and we get to see how those decisions affect their children. It was just a very beautiful book. Another thing I'd say that this book is about is people having to make parts of themselves vanish, or literally vanishing, and the ways that people hide away, because to protect themselves. I finished All the Light We Cannot See, which is a book that I have been talking about, at least in my brain, for a while. Wowie. Okay, so this book took me a while to read because I say it all the time and I think it's negative self-talk, so I should probably stop saying it, but I think it's true. I have kind of bad reading comprehension in general. This book jumps from time and place like wildfire. So for me, I had to sometimes go back and reread things. It was a little bit of a doozy, but it was very beautiful. We're essentially following 3 different storylines, and they are all kind of parallel with each other, but we don't really know how until the end, of course. They're all gonna interblock eventually, right? So we're following a little girl and her father, Marie Leray. I don't know how to say her name, but that's how I pronounced it the entire book, so I'm very sorry if you're French or if you know how to pronounce that name. And they are living in France. I believe when we start, they're living in Paris. Her dad works at this like beautiful like national museum of the historical arts or something. Marie is just like this most charming little girl. She's so sweet and her thoughts are just so curious and cute and good. Like, she is so good. I'm gonna cry. Then we are following Werner in Germany, and he is an orphan, and he is orphaned with his sister, and they live in like a children's home. They live in a very, 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 very poor town, mining town. All the boys get sent off to the mines. But Werner has this fascination with math and engineering, and he just has a knack for those things, so he wishes for more. He has, again, those like external pressures that, you know, you're never going to be able to do those things. Like, you think you're going to be able to engineer one day, you're not. You're just going to work. You're going to work in the coal mine, you're going to die in the coal mine, which his father died in the coal mine. And then the third track is we're following a man who, he ends up being like a high-ranking like Nazi official who is on the search for this gem. Marie Leray learns about this gem from the museum that her father works at, and it's this little jewel that there's like so much lore surrounding the jewel. It's said that whoever holds the jewel will live forever. The Germans take over Paris, where Marie and her father are, so they have to flee. Werner, he ends up thriving in radio repairs, and he actually repairs a radio for someone high up in the Nazi official ranking. As I was saying, Marie Leray had been hearing about that gem, and the third track is this Nazi official. He actually has cancer, so he is on the search for this gem because he's trying to beat the hands of time to get this gem to live forever. So all three of these people are living very separate lives, and then they all intertwine, and it's an amazing book. Some people I read didn't like the lore of the gem. They were like, what's the point of the gem? I'm like, it's cool. It adds like this cool magical feeling throughout the book. Obviously what these people are going through is not beautiful and magical. Like, their lives are being torn apart. Specifically Marie and Werner, the children are always the pawns. The children are always the wager. Where was I going with that? What was I talking about? Oh, I was saying that obviously the subject matter of the book isn't all good and happy and magical, but the gem adds this like lore to the book and this air of like wonder. It's just amazing. And then the writing is the cherry on the cake. The way this author words things is just gorgeous. It's like I'm listening to an amazing song by one of my favorite bands. Love everything about it. I will say, for some people, I can see how the time shifts can get very confusing sometimes, but really by the end it all comes together, and I realize why it had to be that way. Actually, for the first half of the book, I didn't care about that guy searching for the gem. I was almost like, oh, I don't want to hear about this guy. I don't really care about him searching for the gem. Like, I liked the gem storyline. I was very bored by that guy in particular searching for the gem. But then by the end, I was like, okay, that was necessary because this. This is a great segue to another book that I read this month called The Shadows. This book, I was kind of fatigued by the time jumping in this book. Now, by the time I read this book, which is another book that did a lot of time and place jumping, I guess it didn't do it as well as that book had. This is kind of going between child version of the main characters to adult version, and I actually really preferred the adults. So every time it was going back to the children, I was like, oh, these knuckleheads again. I don't really want to read about this. I don't care. Oh, and by the way, before I go on, these two were 5 stars. Nothing to be said about that. The Shadows, I'm gonna give it a 4. It was a great book. The time jumping made me a little fatigued. It was a nice quick read. There were lots of twists. There was lots of like, I thought that I got it, but then I didn't get it. And then I guess the only thing is that at the end, it was like a big it was like a nice slow decompression of action. There's like a very creepy build, and it's like, oh, what the heck? And then it just slowly decompresses. You could read this at night. This is the kind of book you can read at night and you won't be too scared. I think it's about grief, and it's about growing up. I think it's about like how adulthood looks from a child's perspective, and then as an adult it's like, no, I'm still dealing with a lot. It was very fun to read, and look, are you intrigued to know what happens? I think it's worth reading to find out, honestly. Last up, we will go into, I loved this book, Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. The only reason I'm giving this a 4-star is because, and I guess for both of these, maybe it's unfair and maybe someone will see this and be like, that's not how you rate a book. I know a lot of people are mad at Goodreads raters for some reason. Like, they're like, you don't just give a book 5 stars because you liked it. And it's like, okay, I think I'm doing this wrong. These two, their writing was like some of the best I'd read all year, so maybe it wasn't that fair, because this one's writing was actually, it was actually pretty good. This one's writing was really good. This one was the most, it just wasn't as like poetic, I guess, which isn't a bad thing. Like, not every book has to be like super poetic to be an amazing book. This book actually had a better twist, in my opinion. It was more twisty than this book. This book was so fun to read, and it was scary, guys. This book was so scary. I started reading it, and it was like starting to get dark outside, and I was like, I could not keep reading it. I had to literally force myself to sleep so I could wake up the next morning and return reading this. So this girl grows up her whole life. Her life is just, she's kind of traumatized because her dad wrote a book about their real life experience in a haunted house. And the girl was 5, so she can't really remember anything about it. She kind of blocked everything out. But she knows that she really resents her parents for that book, because now everybody knows her as the girl from that haunted house book. She's convinced it's all fake because she can't remember any of it. And her parents refuse to talk to her about it. She doesn't really talk to her mom, and her dad, he passes away. She goes to the lawyer, and he's like, yeah, you get $500,000. Oh, and the keys to the house. And she's like, my dad still has that house. He's like, yeah, your dad still owns the house. And she's like, the haunted house, the house that I hate? Okay, I'm gonna go visit it, and I'm gonna go debunk that it was not haunted. Well, guess who visits the house, and creepy things start happening. Really, really recommend this one. It is super fun to read. It's super creepy, and in the end, you think, you're like, yep, I guess that was gonna happen, but then that's not the case. And you're like, oh, yep, guess that was gonna happen, but it's not the case. And then eventually, what is the case happens, and you're like, I didn't think about that. Yeah, those are my books this month. Upcoming on the pipeline, I'm going to be reading Mexican Gothic. I got these 2 books for free by eating Pop-Tarts. I got We Were Liars and The Sun Is Also a Star. And then I got my book of the month coming in. I got The Splendid in the Vial, so I'm super excited because book of the month books are always gigantic and really good quality, so I'm super excited to have The Splendid in the Vial for in the book of the month version. So I got The Splendid in the Vial and The Night Swim, which is supposed to be another twisty book, and I'm obsessed with twisty books, so when I ordered my August book of the month, I was like, this has to be twisty because I'm like obsessed. Almost like these are much more my pace, these are much more my style of book, but I almost want to push these back down the pipeline and order some really good suspense. So I know I can ask Donica because she loves suspense, she loves creepiness. I'm ready for that right now. So if y'all have any suggestions, leave them in the comments below, but I'm also going to ask Donica, so let's see what she says, because I really want to read more creepy books, more suspenseful books. Guys, it's been so fun talking to you about the books that I read this month. I could have done a whole book talk on every single one of these books. None of them were bad, they were all good. I got very lucky this month. I think some of the reason that I got so lucky is because I used book of the month. That service has been going really, really good, and that's my honest review. I've been paying monthly for it. So I can leave my code below if you are enticed at all to try book of the month. It's been really, really great talking to you about the books that I read this month. I hope you enjoyed Donica's books because they are coming up.
Okay, so now jumping into the books I read this month. I read Crescent City. This is my most anticipated book of the year. This is by Sarah J. Maas, who, if you have watched any of my videos, I try to say as much as possible how much I love her. If I were to be asked right now who my favorite author is currently, it would be Sarah J. She's just an author that when she puts out a book, this book is her step into adult urban fantasy. I love her writing style. I love her pacing. This book is 800 pages from start to finish. It had me gripped. It had me hooked. She just does not disappoint me. So in Crescent City, like I said, this is her step into adult urban fantasy. We are following our main character, Bryce Quinlan. She's just a normal 22, 23-year-old girl. She goes to work and then she parties with her best friend, Danica, and the group of werewolves that Danica oversees. It's like they're her family. It is set in a city, but in a city creatures of all kinds, and they're kind of sectored out into different areas of the city. You have vampires, you have werewolves, you have mer people, you have all kinds of creatures, and overseeing basically everyone are angels. Now, when disaster strikes very early on, her friends are all murdered. In order to solve this mystery, she teams up with a fallen angel who is part of the angel police force, essentially, and his name is Hawk. They are both on a mission to figure out who killed Danica and why. You know Danica for all of 20 to 30 pages. That's really all the time you have to build that relationship before disaster strikes. And when I tell y'all she was my best friend too, I'm just saying, like, this book is incredible. The last 200 pages of this book were so good. 5-star, 10-star, actually the first 10-star read of the year. The next book I read to cleanse my emotional palette was The Shadows by Alex North. I actually picked this book up from Book of the Month. I picked up Mexican Gothic and The Shadows. I gave The Shadows 5 stars. The first book I've read by Alex North. He only has 2 books out. The Whisper Man is his first book, and I actually just picked that up. So I'll be reading that this month in August. But in The Shadows, we are following our main character. I believe his name was Paul Adams, and you're going from past to present, kind of figuring out what went on in the past, kind of how it ties into the present. And when Paul was a young boy, him and his best friend kind of stumbled upon this friendship with this other young boy named Charlie Crabtree. Charlie was obsessed with this entity that lived in the dream world named Red Hands. And yes, Red Hands is as creepy and scary as it sounds. And Charlie made it like his mission to be able to join Red Hands in the dream world and live forever. It's horror, it's thriller. You're not really sure which, it's kind of genre bending, I like to dub these books. You don't know which one it's leaning more to. Is it more horror or is it more mystery thriller? Like I said, 5 stars because it was just a really fast, easy read. The writing style was perfect to me. Pacing was perfect. It was just creepy enough to kind of keep me on the edge of my seat. Then the next book I jumped into was A Thief Among the Trees, and this is a graphic novel by Sabaa Tahir. This is a prequel to An Ember in the Ashes, although you would need to have read at least the first Ember in the Ashes book before reading this because you kind of won't know what's going on. And even though I've read 2 books from An Ember in the Ashes series, and I love them. I loved them so much when I read them. They were incredible. That series is incredible. But the details have kind of slipped my mind, so I do need to catch up with that series because the final book is releasing at the end of this year. We are following Helene, Elias, and Tavi, and in this world, kids are taken from their families at a very young age and thrown into this academy where they're essentially trained to be heartless assassins. In An Ember in the Ashes, we see them as graduates. They are right at the end of their schooling. And this kind of gives you a taste of one of the tiny little missions that they are thrown into as babies, as children, in order to really break their spirit and turn them into heartless killing machines, essentially. So we have these 3 friends, and they're traveling to an island to steal some poison. And the art is incredible. The art is by Sonia Leo, and I like it. I like the style. So if you like this series, I recommend this is a good purchase. Oh, and I gave that 4 stars. So the next book I read I was so excited. I did a whole read with me or book check-in vlog, and it was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. I gave that book 4 stars. In Home Before Dark, we are following our main character, Maggie. And I think Shelby read this too, so I don't want to do the summary if she did. But really quickly, we're following our main character, Maggie. Her family became infamous because her dad wrote this story about when she was younger, kind of like the Amityville Horror. It was her own version where they lived in a haunted house. They had to flee in the middle of the night, and she's kind of grown up her whole life resenting this book, resenting her parents. There's a lot of secrets and mysteries involved. Once again, it was kind of horror, or is it more thriller? Is it paranormal? Is it something more man-made? I love that. I gave it 4 stars, and I talk about this in my vlog, which I'll be posting here in a couple of days. I'm not sure if I would have enjoyed it more if I had read this before The Shadows by Alex North, because I just enjoyed that type of horror or thriller mystery more than this one. So after reading those books, I kind of took a little break, took a little week off of reading, and then like I always do when I'm in a little tiny bit of a slump, I go to Kindle Unlimited, I see what they got going on over there. I always find something good. On the 28th of July, I believe, they actually released an Amazon exclusive collection called Hush, and it was an anthology featuring a bunch of thriller writers, the most well-known being Ruth Ware and Jeffery Deaver. I have not read any of these authors before. The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware is on my like TBR right at the top. So I was super excited because I was thinking, ooh, I get this little tiny short story. Maybe I'll get a taste of her writing and see if I enjoy it or not. So I will just go down. There was 6 stories. None of them are more than 80 pages, and the longest was Jeffery Deaver's, which I'll get to that. But all of them are very like Twilight, the TV series, or Dark Mirror. Is it Dark Mirror? Dark Mirror, Black Mirror, that show on Netflix. Like they're all kind of twists. There are twists and turns going on. So the first one I read was called Snowflakes by Ruth Ware. I gave this one 3 stars. I was disappointed in it for sure. So in this story, we have our main character who is whisked away in the middle of the night with her brothers and sister by her father. And they are fleeing from something. They actually end up fleeing to a small deserted island where they live in peace and harmony for many years. And the father will go into the mainland and try to scavenge for supplies and comes back quickly because whatever's going on there is dangerous, and he just tries to get back home to his kids as quickly as possible. Then one day when he comes back, he says they need to start building a wall because they're coming, and you're trying to figure out who is they, what do they want, what are they running from, what's going on. It's very got like a dystopian feel, which I think is very different from what she usually writes. I was very disappointed. I don't hold it against her. I just think she was trying something new and it kind of fell flat for me. The next book I read was called Treasure by Oyinkan Braithwaite, and she is a Nigerian author. And this story, Treasure, is based in Nigeria. So it's kind of cool because some of the main characters will throw in their Nigerian slang, and so that's pretty neat just to see that. But basically, this story is just about a young girl named Treasure who is obsessed with social media, and basically how when you're clout chasing or doing it for the gram, how that can go wrong. So I gave that one 4 stars. The next one I read was called Slow Burner by Lippman, and this one I gave 4 stars. Ooh, it was so, I like this one because a wife finds a cell phone, a second cell phone from her husband, and you're watching this emotional affair play out. The husband and this girl that they've had issues with before, and the husband trying to step out with her before. So you're just reading that and seeing what happens, which, you know, it could go many ways and which way is it gonna go. I really like that one. The next one was Buried by Jeffery Deaver. He's the author of The Bone Collector. I gave this one 5 stars. Holy cow, y'all, in 80 pages, this man wrote a whole novel. Oh my gosh, I have read 600-page books that don't fulfill me like this 80-page short story. Mr. Deaver, you sure know how to write a story. So I will say I've never read anything by him, but The Bone Collector I watched multiple times. I really enjoyed that movie. If you haven't seen it, it's like a 90s or early 2000s classic. It has Denzel Washington, who I've been in love with since I was a wee little girl. I love him so much. So in this short story, we are just following this old school journalist who doesn't like how all of the news is like going onto the internet. Everything's on the internet now. Newspapers are going downhill. So he's about to retire because he's just about had enough. His last case he's doing is about a serial killer called the Gravedigger. And what this person will do is they'll abduct a random person, bury them alive, and give you a clue, and you have to kind of figure out where they are, hopefully in time based on his clue. 5 stars. I really want to pick up The Bone Collector because that's the first book in this like 20+ book series of, I guess it's following like a detective or who knows. The next one I read was called The Gift. There's only 2 more, I'm almost done. And this one was by Alison Gaylin. I gave this one 5 stars. In this one, you're following this big time A-list actress when her daughter goes missing, and her husband suggests that they use a psychic to find her. 5 stars. I like this one because this one was more, it was a little bit more out there with the whole psychic aspect, so I really enjoyed that one. And then the last one I read was Let Her Be by Lisa Unger. I gave this one 4 stars. This one was really cool too. Man, all of these are really good, y'all. Check out the anthology. You'll read them all in like one day. So in this one, we're following our main character whose last relationship ended in disaster. It ended in violence. It ended in a suicide attempt. It was not good. He's had to distance himself from his ex. He's had to kind of go to therapy or start rebuilding his life. Then one day, one of their mutual friends comes and they start talking about his ex, and then they start kind of looking at her social media, where almost exactly after him and her broke up, she found a new partner, and they're like kind of living off in this secluded cabin, and they're looking at her Instagram and they're kind of seeing that some of the photos look like they've been reused or maybe not taken where she's saying they're taken. And it's this big old thing where they're trying to figure out, wait, is she like, no one's talked to her for over a year? Is this true? Is something more nefarious going on? I feel like all of these kind of like a moral to them, right? Like, if you're living your life in a not good way, this is what could happen. Okay guys, so am I a cheerleader? As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the hashtag Bang community if you want to. But until our next video, y'all, I will talk to you next time. Bye.